We're gonna be calling Shannon High.
Downey, this is your team. Please meet us at Dairy Queen. We miss you, Downey. Please. Please go home, Downey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Shannon Show, episode number 6, with a special guest, the director and the founder of the Museum of the American Military Family, Dr. Circe Olson Woessner.
Good.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be on your show. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us. I mean, I reached out about the Foot Locker. In case you guys missed it, I did an interview on her podcast that's with the museum, and it was great. You guys should all go check it out. I linked to it in my YouTube channel, so you'll find that in the description as well. And it was great. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And this is fun too, this new technology. You know, I'm almost 60. This is like,
Yeah. So, anyone doesn't know, you have your own museum. It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, correct?
Right. Just outside, 7 miles east.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And I just want to get to know a little bit about your initial mission for that museum, and how did you get to this point? How did you get to the point where you're opening your own museum, and if that's something you always wanted to do? So let's start there. Whenever you first opened the museum, what was your initial mission and purpose for it, and is it still the same today?
Well, it is still the same today. So the museum, I did not ever want to start a museum. It never even occurred to me. I'm a military wife, a military mom. I work for the federal government. I grew up overseas. I'm a brat. And so one day my son was deployed to Iraq, and I'm sitting there in the kitchen watching TV and looking at the news going, God, I hope he comes home okay. I worked at the VA at the time, so I saw firsthand the results of war. And I was like, I hope he does a good job. I hope he doesn't get injured. And I thought about all the other military moms and dads that are sitting around the kitchen table, you know, hoping their kids come home safely. And I said, you know, this is something that has joined us military families for generations. I mean, every single military generation has had some war. So I said, I wonder who's telling our stories, us military mom stories. And so I Googled it like everybody else. And I'm like, military mom museum, military mother museum, nothing. Military family museum, nothing. And I thought, so I'll have to start one.
Yes, you'll have to do it.
I'll just have to do it. Something's got to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I called my dad, who was 80 something at the time. I'm like, Dad, we're going to start a museum. And he's like, cool. And then I didn't do anything about it. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm in.
Sounds good.
But yeah, he's pretty, he pivots well. So then I didn't do anything because my husband was always TDY. I was always working. And about 6 months into this, I'm going to start a museum and doing absolutely nothing, my dad said, hey, are we starting this or not? Because I'm not getting any younger. And if you want to do it, we got to do it. So I got some friends together and we just decided to start a museum dedicated to military families. We broadened it. We didn't want to just say military moms, you know, because.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it encompasses parents, spouses, partners, kids, brothers, sisters, anybody who loves a service member and considers them family. That's our audience.
That's great. So what did you start with? I mean, what did you have with you at the time that you said this can go into the museum right away? Nothing. So I tend to be a little right-brained, and my first partner in this whole escapade was a very left-brained. So the first thing we started with was kind of a mission statement and a vision statement, and that works too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and then I started walking around my house, and I said, well, I've got this, you know, and I started collecting artifacts, but she kept us focused. And so for the first several years, we literally were kind of an online museum, you know. Yeah. There's a lot of organizations that will start and go really quickly with, you know, raising lots of money and then blowing lots of money and then, you know, going out of business. And I don't like that concept because people started trusting us with their artifacts. People started trusting us with, you know, their stories, and I didn't want to let anybody down. So I would say for about 2 or 3 years, we pretty much just collected stories and started partnering with other museums in town to do exhibits.
So when you said collected stories, you mean, so this is like word of mouth, you're just hearing people talk, you're having people come in and talk to you. Was that like through the podcast, or was there a lot of written stuff as well?
No, the podcast is new. We've only been doing the
Okay.
podcast since March. So what it was is we would tell people, hey, we're starting a museum. And they're all like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we started by blogging. So we had a blog, and then we created
Right.
a couple more blogs. And so I'm on a lot of Facebook groups. So somebody would tell an interesting story. I'd say, hey, can I have that for the museum? And it kind of came
Yeah.
like that. And so, I'm copying and pasting right off of Facebook, always asking permission. And it just started organically growing. And then I decided that, well, in order to be a museum, we have to take classes, we have to learn, we have to join organizations. So we joined all the ones like the American Association of Museums. I think that's the name of it. The New Mexico Association of Museums.
Yeah.
And we really went slow and steady.
Yeah. So when was this? How long ago was this?
We started it in 2011.
Wow. So
Like 8 years, 9 years.
9 years. Yeah. So did you start to realize that people, like, this was impacting people right away? Like, as soon as you started bringing the stories in, could you tell? I mean, because there's a lot of emotion that's attached to those stories and a lot of, like, I don't know, sentimental attachment. Could you tell that it was affecting people?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So even though we didn't have a physical building at the time, we were amassing artifacts in the garage, literally. And people would tell me, oh, hey, I was cleaning out this old veteran's house and he died. And he has all of this stuff and I don't want to throw it away. Do you want it? In part of me, well, and I always said yes, but part of the left brain part of my team said, that's not really the military family. You're getting mission creep. But,
Yeah.
so but it made the people feel good that they were giving it to a museum. And we were, of course, very grateful to get it and very proud to display the artifacts because, without the veteran, we don't have a family. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it made sense to me. In our physical location, which I'll try to give you a tour without getting you all like spinning around, but we have people walk in and burst into tears, especially.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have veterans that say, I've walked by here for 3 years now and I've never come in because it just brings too much baggage. But I've had brats walk in and burst into tears. They say, oh my God, somebody's telling my story and you're telling it true. Because what we decided in the very beginning is we were going to tell the good, the bad, and the in-between of military family life. So we're not spinning it to one side or the other. We're not the negative museum. We're not the uber positive museum. We are telling the good, the bad, and the in-between.
Yeah, that's powerful. I can imagine just having some experiences myself and just seeing all of it and all the history that comes with it, because there's so many kids like me who have been going through this for generations. To see it all accumulated in one spot, it must be very, very powerful to see. So let's get into something that just nowadays, how has running the museum changed with COVID-19? Because I can't imagine like a lot of the in-person stuff, but I know you started online, you said, so.
Yeah, we started online. So actually we've been closed. We're still closed.
Yeah.
We've been closed since March. We did our last thing in March and it was interesting. So we do naturalization ceremonies here. So military family members get their citizenship right here in the museum.
Okay.
We do one a quarter. And our very last one was like March 13th. And we were starting to get COVID in our state.
Yeah.
And we knew that this was nobody had been said we're closing yet, but I was already thinking, we're going to have to close like China's closing,
Yeah, it's good. It's coming.
So our last event literally was, and breaking news was happening and we'd all forgotten to turn off our phones. So we're in this middle of the ceremony here. Bing! And I'm looking down, okay, 10 more cases of COVID, 12 cases of COVID. And
what it felt like, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really weird. It was a very emotional. I thanked everybody for coming in the middle of a pandemic to get their citizenship. It meant so much to them that they were willing to risk getting sick to come.
Yeah.
But it has been difficult, so we've been closed. And, we depend on grants, donations, and people dropping $1 or $2 in the donation box. So we've had nobody drop $1 or $2 in since March.
Yeah.
And there's a danger in anything. You see businesses closing all over the place, and of just out of sight, out of mind. So I thought, what can I do? Well, we've done things for years online, the blogs. We have 7 blogs. So we have been really boosting up our social media presence, and we started a podcast about the same time you probably started your podcast. Yeah. So have the podcast, and then we have the 7 blogs, and then lots on Facebook. And we've been doing a lot of contests, you know, hey, write a story about your grandparents. How are they supporting the military, you know, and things like that. So we've kept it going.
Yeah, I can imagine that must be a real tough challenge, just having to make that transition. Good thing you started online though, and you guys already had a good presence going into that. What were some of the challenges?
Failure is not an option.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. What were some of the challenges when you first opened? I mean, we already talked about it a little bit, but how did you gain publicity and gain, I mean, you said online, but how did you start getting people to come into the museum?
Well, so first of all, when you start something brand new, there's a huge learning curve. I knew nothing about starting a museum. I'm a teacher from a background, so I could put together like social studies projects and things like that. This is like a great big social studies project in a way, you know, here, displaying here. But educating the public. So what are we? We're a museum. Oh, you're a veterans museum. Well, isn't there one down the street? Well, yes, that's a veterans museum. This is a military family museum. I had one guy say, military family, so what?
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Exactly.
But so there was a lot of education, and then there was a lot of confusion, especially because, like I said, we started online, so we were a blog. So people thought we were a blog. Then we did something with the National Nuclear Museum, our first exhibit, which was fabulous. And then we did something with the Balloon Museum. We did something with Explorer. We did things with all sorts of different museums in town. And that confused the brands, because everybody said to me when I said, listen, we need to get a building. We're our museum. Oh yeah, you're at the Nuclear Museum. You're those Blue Star Mothers, you know, you belong to the Blue Star Mothers. And I'm like, no, that's a group, that's a different museum, you know. And so there was constantly an education about what we are, who we do things with, why we do things, you know, and you know, it's a learning curve.
Yeah, because I'm sure you want to expand your audience in a way, but you don't want to lose track of what your brand is and what your initial mission statement. So another thing you guys came up with was, this is how I found you. And I thought this was so cool right away. I sent you an email. I was like so excited when I saw this. I'm like, this is insane. Like, I've never seen anything like this. That was the Operation Footlocker. Where did you come up with the idea? And if you could just explain it a little bit for everyone.
Well, so first of all, the museum did not come up with Operation Footlocker.
Right.
But it's with us. So it was started by a group of adult brats in 1996. And when the internet was, you know, relatively new, and they found each other, and they started a little group, this group of adults, and they decided they wanted their own museum. But where would they put it? Who would fund it? You know, making a museum is not easy.
And all the usual questions.
Yeah. So they decided a Foot Locker would be great. And then everybody in that group donated an item or two of what was relevant to what shows the best of brat culture. And so from there, they started the concept of a school reunion. So let's just say Karlsruhe, where I graduated. Let's say Karlsruhe is having a reunion. Karlsruhe High School, somebody there would ask for the Foot Locker. This group had somebody managing it, would ship the Foot Locker to Karlsruhe, to the school. The people would then display the items in the Foot Locker and add an additional item or two with the Foot Locker, and then they would pay to ship it back. And so it grew over time so that there were 3 Foot Lockers. And so when we took over the Foot Locker management in 2011, there were 3 Foot Lockers, because every time you add something to it, of course, you finally run out of room.
Yeah, you're gonna need more than one.
We're up to now 7 Foot Lockers. So
wow.
Yeah.
So who usually requests those? So you said like the high school reunions?
Yeah, usually it's an alum group that requests
Yeah.
them, although the USO and on the East Coast in Richmond, no, the Red Cross in Richmond asked for one year, and then the USO in Fort Belvoir, and then in the DC area, I can't remember which one, and then also in Jacksonville, it's been to them. And then because we are here locally, we take it to DAV reunions. We've taken it to the Kirtland Air Force Base
Yeah.
Chapel. So it's mostly school groups that want it because it's their culture. It's their
Yeah, it's
history.
something.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And it's the only thing like it from what I've seen.
Well, actually, the World War II Museum in New Orleans
Yeah.
started on well after the original Operation Foot Locker, and it caused a little confusion. But we organized it. We're fine.
Yeah, they're separate. They're separate. So we'll get into the museum tour in just a second. What are some of your favorite contributions to the Foot Lockers? I'm not sure if you have one with you that you could show us
I
later.
Yeah, I do later. But
Okay.
so when you leave a Foot Locker somewhere, you're expecting people to curate and make sure that it's taken care of, and you never know what you're going to get back. And so
Yeah.
when it came back, so one summer the Foot Locker had a better summer than I did. The Foot Locker went to the East Coast. I want to say Fort Belvoir, to the USO. The USO shipped it down to a bar in St. Augustine, Florida, that was run by a Navy vet and his wife, and they displayed it for a while, and then they drove it to Jacksonville, to the USO there, and then Jacksonville sent it back to us. Well, when we got it back, in a baggie was a green beret and a handwritten note stuck to the green beret saying, "This green beret belonged to my husband. He had 2 tours of Vietnam. He had a tour of Korea. He was a wonderful father, husband, and he had 30 years of experience in the police force afterwards. And he just died. And we want you to know that this was a wonderful, American patriot."
Wow. And
Yeah.
what does it feel like to receive something like that, like so powerful from someone else's life?
Yeah, well, especially a stranger who doesn't know
Yeah.
it. You tear up, you do. And so that's no longer in a Foot Locker. That one is framed. We have a little frame, and the beret is displayed with the letter. Other things we've gotten that have been really poignant it was just a photocopied bunch of pictures. No explanation, just pictures of a baby, and then maybe a toddler. It was a boy. And then like a high school graduation picture, and then a service member picture. And then all of a sudden, just handwritten, "R.I.P. my darling."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And so you ask how the museum impacts people. It impacts people by sharing their worst moments and their best moments with us, and to give us a piece of their life. And I guarantee you, anybody who has not served in the military who looks at that picture, those pictures, immediately understands the impact of war on one family. This isn't on TV, all the happy welcome home pictures. This is the
No,
brutal.
it's not always like that.
Yeah, it's the brutal.
Yeah, it's great that you can show both sides of it, and it be, there's none of your opinion in it. It's just the facts and the history. So I want to move into just a little bit about your personal life. I know you said you didn't always want to start a museum. So what was your transition? You said you grew up as a brat. What was your transition out of brat life and then eventually having a military family of your own? And how did that go?
Well, so I grew up in Germany. I was born in France, grew up in Germany. My parents are DOD civilians, and my dad's a veteran. He's an occupation World War II veteran.
Yeah.
So I grew up 18 years in Germany. So where I was different than the military kids is the military kids would PCS every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So my kids would leave and come back. I was there. And mostly because their dads were engineers, so there's only certain places they can go. And also
it's limited.
And mom, so they came back to Germany. So when I graduated Karlsruhe High School in '79, and I started attending college in Munich, in Germany.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the University of Maryland Munich campus. Now everybody knows University of Maryland global campus, and they're all over the world. You know, they go to combat zones and everything. But they had a campus in Munich at the time. So I did, and I graduated high school at 16. I was not a student. I was done with high school
Wow.
before we even started
16.
high school. So my dad said, absolutely, you're not going to the States because it's too far. You're too young. He thought I was too young to go to college. I probably was, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Went to school in Munich. So I met my husband there, my boyfriend at the time, and the both of us came back to the States after our sophomore years, and the transition was awful.
Oh, wow.
In Germany, I first of all, I knew the culture, I knew the people, I had freedom. The drinking age was 16.
Yeah.
You know,
I hear about that a lot.
Yeah. So I was comfortable. I came back to the States. I couldn't even drive, and I didn't understand the people. I made a mistake with the wrong college. I won't even say which college I graduated from. My husband was from that state, and so we came back. It was a conservative state. I grew up very much a hippie child, and I came back to the Bible Belt and conservative.
Yeah.
and so there was that culture, and I grew to love the
Exchange.
yeah, but it was awful, and I had no friends. I was homesick. I was depressed, and it was rough. It was a rough thing. So it took years.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah. Try being 18 and not knowing how to drive in the States.
Yeah, exactly. I had a similar issue. I wasn't able to drive when I first got back from my senior year of high school either. Yeah, I couldn't imagine being out in Germany for 18 years though, or 16. That must have been even more difficult. So what's something that you learned throughout that process? Like, were there any big lessons that you learned from that transition that you still find value in?
I learned I had to depend on myself to, because some people thought there was things wrong with me. Why am I not fitting in? Why am I weird? Why am I different?
Yeah.
And it took me years to realize, hey, you know what? It's actually, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine. And, I am going to be fine, and I'm smart, and I'm able to do it. I'm just having a little rough patch, because I was beginning to doubt, whether I could. So the lesson I've learned is depend on yourself, know yourself, and be assertive, and you may have to fake it until you make it, but you will make it.
Yeah, trust who you are and what your talents are. Is there any personal items? I know you have the museum. Any personal items like that you have personally that you cherish?
Yeah, besides my husband. He's my souvenir from Bradhood, right?
I guess so.
Together. Yeah, I think we've been married like 37 years or something.
Wow.
Long time. Got married on my 19th birthday. I was on that fast track.
19. Wow. Yeah, you took a speed run.
Yeah, I was doing it all. It's funny. So I'm not very sentimental in some ways.
You started a museum?
Well, yeah. All my stuff in it now. No, so two things I have from my Bradhood. It's kind of interesting. So I don't have my wedding dress. I don't have any of the stuff that most people keep. But I have a smock top that I bought in the late 70s with my first paycheck in Germany. And it's all embroidered. It's real hippie. And I still have that. I've carried that around. And then the other thing I have is it's a shirt that I bought in Yugoslavia. We were going through the Balkans with a student group. And I got that smock top with some dollars and a couple of packs of Marlboro cigarettes, and because that's
what you bought it with.
Yeah, you bargain with cigarettes back
then.
Yeah. So those two things I have carried through 18 CSs. I have carried those always, and they're in the museum now. Hey,
that's
so
great.
I didn't get rid of them.
That's one way to hold on to them. That's great to hear. So I just have a few broader questions. Is there anything that you want my audience to know, like younger brats today? Any advice for them a lot of the same age that you were whenever you made that transition back to the States.
Well, you know, it's funny because things have changed a lot. You know, culture has changed, life has changed, but there are so many similarities between back then and current day brats that you can always find common ground. Like, I was interviewing a military spouse who was a World War II spouse. And so she's significantly older than I am. And even though her experiences were way different than mine, there was enough similarity that we could be cackling and snickering about the same kinds of I can't even speak, incidents that happened. And I think the same with brats. You know, there's enough there from your generation to my generation that we can find common ground. And plus the adaptability of military kids, the resilience.
Sure.
You know, you could be dropped off in the middle of a country you've never been and probably do okay, you know, better than somebody who's never left, you know, the States or whatever country they live in.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's enough there. So you have, as a brat, you have joined a family that has generationally, you know, tied together.
Just understand how big it is and how much it
See?
I can't say that word either. That's, all right. That's all the questions I have directly for you. If you would not mind showing us some of the museum, I would absolutely love that through the call.
Yeah. So there may be a little spinning because this is not my forte, but
right, it's fine.
Yeah. So we're actually in the library. Can you see that?
Yeah, so you can see the books, so much stuff.
Yeah.
What are most of those?
Well, so over here, we have memoirs written by military brats. We have spouse memoirs. We have books on the culture of military families. I don't know if you see the book Brats. Wow. We have folios. All these colored folders are firsthand stories written mostly by military brats. And we have folio stories going back to World War II. We have documents of base newspapers. I don't know if you can see that. See, it says newspapers.
Yeah.
Post and base newspapers going back to World War I. We have letters from family members and troops going back to World War I, and some photographs going to the Civil War. So we have about 2,000 plus items in the museum.
Wow, that is just the primary sources just right there. That's just exactly. Amazing.
I'm going to tip. I don't know how to do this. Okay.
You got it. We can see. Yeah.
Okay. So there's some things. So people drop off things. You didn't ask me how we get things. So people drop off things. So this Croix de Guerre is a citation from 1914 to 1918. A woman called me up and she said, "Hey, my father was in World War I. Do you want artifacts from him?" And I said,
absolutely.
Of course I do. And the story with this one is that he was a Quaker and he went off to war. And Quakers are usually pacifists, right? But they do feel their conscience and they will go to war or go in as a medic or something like this. So he was in one of the most highly decorated Marine units ever. And so he came home, never spoke of the war, even though he had multiple decorations. And so she just found his stuff years later. She was in her 90s. So she had us come and get that. Uh-oh, my video went away.
Oh yeah, we lost your video.
So that'll teach me.
There we go, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Hey, you recognize this guy here?
Is that from the movie you told me to watch?
No, that's Jesse Polar.
I'm not familiar.
Oh, ask your father.
Okay, for sure.
Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little bit about our museum. We are in a house, okay? So our museum is in a house. We are next to Molly's bar, and we are literally in Molly's house. And she was a force of nature. So when you walk into our museum, you're coming into the symbolic home that everybody,
right.
A brat doesn't have a symbolic home. Where's your home? You know, it's wherever you are, right?
Not easy.
Yeah. So this is our Military Kids Lives exhibit. And so if you walk this way, you'll see some of the who's in military culture. Mark Curtis started Military Brats Registry. Mary Edwards Wirch, I'm going to get my PT in here, wrote the book, Military Brats. And it was the first like academic book on military brats. And you see the name Pat Conroy.
Yes.
Yeah. Laura Belden down here, she was our artist in residence for years. She and I are working on a play together right now.
Oh, wow.
Donna Nizzle made the movie that I told you to watch.
Get into that.
And now these 4 panels, you can see them,
Yes.
they're purple. I'll get back a little. So they're purple, different color purple. So there was a poem on the internet a couple years ago saying, I am a military child and I've moved more times than I can count and all of that.
Yes.
And so I asked permission for it. And then I had military brats from different generations write the same poem. So purple is the military brat color.
Yes.
So
Yeah, familiar with that.
So the lightest purple is the newest generation. Then we've got a brat who wrote the same poem from the perspective of the 80s and 90s. And then this darker purple from the 50s and 60s.
Wow. And
the darkest purple from a brat who is still alive from the 30s and 40s.
Wow, that's an incredible idea.
Yeah, so,
great.
You know, it talks a little bit about what they saw. Like the 80s and 90s brat, he said he played in the fallout of Chernobyl. You know, we had military families stationed in Europe when Chernobyl happened, and some of them, you know, think that they got some exposure to radiation. Just like you guys with Fukushima.
Yeah, around a similar time. Yeah, but I know the Chernobyl one, that was a big deal. I couldn't imagine being around that at the time.
Yeah. My husband and I went back to Germany only a couple years after Chernobyl. So, yeah. Okay. So this is the Brat exhibit here. So we've got display cases with things that are relevant to military brats. And I'm going to go sort of fast because there's a lot. And I don't know how much you're seeing.
I can see that. No, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So over here is the Green Beret. See?
Oh, wait. Yes, I can. Yes.
Yeah, and the little thing.
And that's the letter.
Yeah. This hat was worn by my wonderful husband and father. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Joseph. I can't get that close right now. Knoll, who died 4/27/2014. He loved his country and family. So
powerful. What's up with the spam?
Spam is what the military need a lot of spam, but there's, you know, depending where you live and you know, the culture too, it's interesting. But there's actually we have many spam cans. People that put them in our Foot Locker. So this little piece here is all different generational stuff, you know, Vietnam, OEF, OIF, Cold War. And then over here, we start our spouse exhibit. See that? Together we serve the military spouse. And so we're set up like a house. So now you come into the living room.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. I love this idea.
Yeah. And what do you see here?
You have the fireplace. You have, what is that? Is that an ironing board? An iron?
Ironing board. And I will tell you something. Oh, gosh, that's my POW table. Oh, see, I'm dyslexic. Now I'm all nauseous here looking. The ironing board, the BDU pants, these are ACUs. They are still stiff. They're 6 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you properly starch stuff.
Yeah, that's well done.
Yeah. I didn't do it. I was fired from the whole ironing. So my friend Caroline, those are her husbands. Most of the soldiers in my husband's generation, they took over the ironing because we weren't able to do it properly. And that's fine.
Yeah, no, it's very tedious.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'm glad I was fired from the ironing. So to show you again, this exhibit here says balconies. That's the high points of being a spouse. See balconies? That comes from the Clifton Strength Finders. Here's the basements. Some of the bad stuff about being in the military family. So we do talk about it. Let me go back with me so that you're not, oh, here. In here we have an entire, there's too much glare. A wife gave me her husband's collection of World War II artifacts. He had this in their living room. He collected a helmet, a hat, a knife, and medals from the Axis and the Allies of World War II. So over here, you're walking into the kitchen. Now this was all Molly's kitchen. And so we're, like I said, we're set up in a house. So we encourage people to look inside our cupboards. But here's what I wanted to show you. This is our Operation Foot Locker prototype we put out for you guys. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, let me put it down. Got it?
Very neat. Yes, got you.
So this is not the one we ship, but this is one I just threw together today so that I could
Yeah.
show some of the things that are in it. So most of the things have been donated by military brats. So we have a Girl Scout jacket from Camp
What?
Moutso?
What's the date on that?
1957.
That's insane.
Yeah. Motosu. So we've got that. Have you ever seen these? Marine Corps Barbie?
I don't think I have, but that's interesting.
All of the Barbies. And we have the G.I. Joes and the Kens too.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with the G.I. Joes.
Yeah. But yeah, you'd think they'd be making these now. I think these are from the 80s. Now this is something that your generation is familiar with. It's a doll, and you put the Lloyd service member's photograph here.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I've seen those before, yes.
Yeah, but this is when we ship Operation Foot Locker, the older group has never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
So it's kind and of course civilian kids haven't either. So other things in the Foot Lockers that you would get are shirts from different schools.
Yeah.
People who have written their memoirs. So this one says, I went to school at Dachau American Dependent School. You've heard of Dachau?
No, where is that?
So Dachau was one of the worst extermination camps during World War II. And there were hundreds and hundreds of subcamps. And when the camps were closed after World War II, military sent in people, and I don't know all the story, the history.
Sure.
They sent in people to do the trials, the war crimes trials.
Yeah.
Had families move in with their service member, and we actually opened a small school in a former concentration camp for a while.
Oh,
so
I didn't know that.
Wrote about what it was like to live and grow up in what used to be a concentration camp.
Well, yeah, those must be some of my favorites for sure. Just the written history directly from the brats.
Yeah. So this is, he says, Dachau's appalling legacy affects me much more now than it did while living there. My heart sinks every time I recall an image of those women's disapproving faces. He was talking about he and his friends were running around the camp playing, cops and robbers or something. And these women were watching them just shooting at each other and were horrified.
Yeah, they're just being kids, but yeah.
Yeah, he didn't, I guess I should put my head down there.
Oh, you're fine.
He didn't, he didn't know. His parents didn't explain it. So in here, we also have different yearbooks. So I pulled up one from Yo High, 1951. And it's
1951.
Yeah. So, what the high school in Nasagubu Beach.
Wow.
I can't speak Japanese. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I am really butchering it. But we have a bunch of yearbooks going all the way back to the 50s and up to the modern days. Here's one from Korea, Chosun Seoul American High School yearbook, 2006.
Seoul American High School. I actually been there before. Yeah.
2006.
Yeah. No, I wasn't there in 2006, but I was 4.
You can see the difference of the yearbooks.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah. So this is a movie. This is a movie I recommend brats, especially if you're generation,
Yes.
watch. It gives you what it was like to be a brat in the, earlier, mostly I would think the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it's a documentary. It's very powerful. And if you've been kind of questioning why you are the way you are, you may get some insights here from this.
Yeah.
So other things you'll see in the Foot Locker. Well, this woman sent me a trophy from when she was attending school in Tehran. It wasn't a DFE school, but it was an international school. But we had military all over the place. And so she sent us an entire collection of her things. Our museum publishes books.
Really?
And we do anthologies. We've done 13 books since 2016. And this one was called War Child. And we put out a call for stories to people who had experienced war as a child. And so we have stories all the way back to World War II, where, you were growing up as a child during the war. But we also had kids talking about their parents' deployments. And also, and it wasn't just military kids. We asked anybody. So a girl who was growing up in Kuwait when Kuwait was invaded in, I don't know, the late 90s, I think. Holocaust survivors, kids wrote stories, and even a military child that was put into a sex trafficking ring, because that's war as well. So this book is a solid look of generations of children coming to grips with war. And then our
Must be very powerful stories, yeah.
Yeah, and so it could have been just a negative book, a really heavy book, but we asked for a lesson learned. So what did you take away from your lesson growing up in World War II, Well, I learned to be resourceful, Another kid submitted a story. He's in Africa, and his countries were going through civil war, and he was going from camp to camp to camp. His lesson was, you learn to have fun wherever you are, because you make your fun.
Make the most out of it.
Yeah. So one of the more poignant stories in here, the lesson was that you never lose war. Even 50 years later, your father being killed in war is just as raw today as it was then. So that was kind of the story. And then we have one on dogs, because everybody loves a good dog story.
Everybody loves dogs, yes.
This is called My Hero Dog, Story of How Our Dogs Have Helped Shape Who We Are. And this was
It is important, yeah.
Yeah, and these are all stories from brats talking about their dogs.
I mean, the dog is one of the few constants that you can have in your life. Your dog stays with you.
Oh, not always. There are stories in there where, because of quarantine back in England in the day, your dog had to be quarantined for 6 months.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think, yes.
People would leave their animals. One girl said she had dogs in every posting they went to, every base they went to, but they were never the same dog.
Your dogs, they couldn't take them anywhere.
Or their parents didn't make the effort to take them. Yeah. So, and then there's some cool stories. They're not in this book, but this guy smuggled like his goldfish. They used to travel by boat, by ship, they didn't fly.
Yeah.
And he brought his goldfish
Fish.
turtle or something on this ship. I'm like, how is that even legal?
How did you do that?
Smuggled it. So let's go through. So I just wanted to show you, when you open up our cupboards.
Oh, wow. It's like an actual cupboard.
Yeah. There are artifacts people have collected from their time overseas. And so we have stuff from all over the place. Now with COVID, as a museum, if we can only have static displays, and I don't know if opening a cupboard door counts as static or not.
I'm not sure.
So I'm going with it's not.
I
So
don't think so.
here, something, you guys, here's something interesting. The senior class beer mug from Frankfurt High School, 1958.
Senior class beer mug.
Yep. All the graduating seniors on the back.
Wow.
And
Never seen anything like that.
well, yeah, your generation can't drink.
No.
Inside the beer mug, this is totally inappropriate, but it's there, is when you finish your beer, I don't know if you can see it, you won't be able to see
Not really.
it. There's a naked woman at the bottom. So, senior class
That's
beer
great.
mug. This is our pot holder project. We asked people to decorate a pot holder honoring their military mom. And so you've got people who sent in pot holders talking about military wives serve, sacrifice.
Very neat.
Yeah. So now we're going down here into our Schooling with Uncle Sam exhibit. So this is all about the DoD schools. Can you see? Am I?
Yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Okay. And in here is our memorial room. You see our tiger?
Oh wow, that tiger. Yeah. That's.
So
Is that real?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow.
So in this room here, it's our only room where we talk about war. Everything in this room talks about war. So if you see the picture here on the wall, you see the little girl? Mm-hmm. So she was painted by a Vietnam veteran who was with her when she died during the Vietnam War. And he never knew her name, but he figured she was about 14. So he painted a picture about what do you say to a child of 14 who's dying in war. So we got the painting from his widow. We made an altar to her, and then some Vietnam veterans went back to Vietnam and they brought us soil. So we have mixed soil with New Mexico and Vietnam soil, Vietnamese soil, and made an altar to her, because war is not healthy for children and other living things. So in here, everything here has something to do with war. The tiger was killed by a soldier or a policeman in India. And, you know, Bengal tigers are endangered. This is 60 years old. Got donated a sign where everybody signed in honor of somebody that passed away. So this is our Schooling with Uncle Sam exhibit. So all of the artifacts here were collected by DoD teachers.
Yeah. And
so this collection here was Dorothy Cox. She was a teacher in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And everything in here she brought into her classroom so her kids could see what it was like in the host nation. So we've got artifacts from Africa, from Turkey, from the Philippines. If your parents have been in the Middle East, you've seen these trays. And so this is her, this painting of an operation from the Philippines. Do you see it?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and I had a nurse in here going, see, that's back before they had disposable disposable bottles. So those are glass bottles they had to wash. So this thing that looks like a missile launcher thing, that's a nephelometer. That's measuring air particles. And this was given to us by a woman whose husband was with the university in Germany. He was a US soldier working in the 60s with the German university on atmospheric particles. I don't know what they were doing, but we have all his notes and research down there in that box.
Wow, is that like available for people to look at it? Like if they come to the museum?
I would love somebody to look and tell me what he was studying.
Yeah, what it does.
What were they studying in the 60s? Air particle, atmospheric particles. Was it nuclear? Was it weather? Cool. What was it? Yeah. So along here, we have a talon tang, which is a musical instrument. And then we have a case of artifacts just of random things from different schools. Dodds Europe Division South All Conference Soccer Team stuff, an ROTC sword, a JROTC sword.
Yeah.
You know, and these panels here, they talk about what it's like to live in the dorm. You know, some of our schools had dorms, you know, the parents, the brats, the students, the sports, teachers unions. You know, our first schools were in Quonset huts and in chapel basements. In Turkey, it was in a tobacco warehouse. So it talks about the buildings.
And having to learn in there, yeah.
Yeah. So some of them were heated by coal stoves. So we talk about that. And then a little bit of the history. You know, when the schools started, were developed in the late 40s, they were not segregated, you know, because the military wasn't segregated. So the schools weren't going to be segregated.
What school is that with the jacket?
Oh, that one? That's Karlsruhe. That's
Oh,
where
wow.
I graduated. That's not my jacket. She was much better athlete and cheerleader than I was, but she
Yeah,
donated.
looks very similar to the school I went to in Okinawa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then different banners. And then
Wow.
some of the history of the schools, you know, the teacher's guides, you know, the trophies and things like that. Do you have any more questions?
No, that's honestly the things that you're doing is amazing. I can't imagine walking in there. I hope I can stop by at some point. I don't go to New Mexico too often, but I would love to see all this in person.
Yeah, it's a pretty special place. We have a bunch of stuff in storage right now. We're trying to buy a building.
Yeah.
We need a bigger building, and we need one that's more modern. I had to go downstairs, so we're not ADA compliant. So people in wheelchairs can only come into the front.
Wow.
So we'd like to get things with ramps, and so we're raising money. And hopefully 2020 was our year, but it's not.
So where can people donate?
Well, they can go to our Facebook page, and then it says donate. We have a GoFundMe out there under the Museum of the American Military Family. We've raised $31,000. We've raised $31,000. And so we've got a long way to go to get a building, but we're hopeful. You know, the pandemic kind of crashed and burned our whole.
Yeah. But this definitely deserves more attention than what it receives right now.
It does. And so what we need the most right now is just a lot of visibility. We have a lot of unique things here. So I didn't show you my table. See?
Yes.
And most military museums have this, but I wrote, though the ceremonial tables are usually round, the reality is that dining tables of all shapes and sizes are missing loved ones. And that's very,
Wow.
you know, very true with military families. There's a lot of loss. Something civilians don't think about, and maybe we don't think about it as military family members, is that our lives are full of loss in the military. And when civilians mostly think of military loss as death, we think about giving up pets, moving, for spouses not having jobs. You know, you get a good job for a couple of years and you have to give it up. You know, missing your friends and colleagues. So the military family has a lot of loss. And when I think about my kids, well, when I think about myself, when I was married for 11 years, and my husband was at yet another school, I realized that out of those 11 years of marriage, he'd been gone almost 7 of them.
Yeah.
Through deployments and schools and war.
All sorts of things.
Yeah. And so a lot of your generation has grown up with a parent in imminent danger of going to war the whole time.
Yeah.
You know?
And my dad's been gone for a lot of things as well. I mean, just like years that
you'll never get
aren't
them back.
there together. Exactly.
Yeah. So we are here 7 miles east of Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This is probably the coolest thing I've done yet, talking to you and seeing all of this. And I hope everyone goes and checks out their website, the Facebook page, all of your podcasts on Podbean.
Yeah.
And please consider sending a donation, because this museum definitely deserves more attention than what it does. And it's a great cause and very powerful stuff.
Stories. All of you guys blog. Write us one story. We love younger generations stuff, because people come to do research, and most of our brats memories are, you know, from 50 and 60-year-olds. We'd love some young people.
Yeah, send in some stories for sure. Thank you so much again. This is great.
Thank you.
Have a good
Talk to you.
one.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yes, for sure.